Get ready for another fantastic episode of the F-14 Tomcast. We're talking about F-14D combat systems. Today we're talking to an experienced F-14D RIO about the APG-71 radar that was such an improvement over the AUG-9, as well as a whole bunch of other systems like the IRST and more.
In addition, we have some announcements of interest, contest winners, new merch, and more. So strap in and get ready for launch.
On the flight deck, crews are now manning for the next launch. It's time to clear the flight deck and catwalks. Stand well clear of all jet blasts, prop arcs, and exhaust. It's time to start up the GO aircraft. Let's start them up!
When the Navy finally funded the improved Tomcat, which they should have done 10 years earlier, one of the most attention-grabbing features was the new engines, right? But maybe more important for combat effectiveness was the new APG-71 radar and the other weapon system improvements. Our guest today is former F-14D radar intercept officer Mark callsign Fun Mhley, who will give us the 411 on the tail gunner position on the Super Tomcat.
Hey, thanks for getting us started, Crunch. Fun all my time is in the AUG-9A model Tomcat, so I can't wait to hear why the APG-71 and the F-14D was such a great improvement. So let's start them up and get airborne. To get us started, Fun, how about telling us where you're from, how you got into naval aviation, how you got into Tomcats, and the basics like that?
Well, Crunch Bio, thanks for having me tonight. I mean, I really feel like I'm standing on the shoulders of giants here to talk about the F-14 Delta and all of the magic that aircraft brought. Bio, I'm sorry that you had no time in the Delta. As I'll try to share tonight, my only A time was going through the Top Gun course, and man, that was F-14A appreciation time. So we'll get into that, I'm sure. So I am a 1996 graduate from the Naval Academy, and it's good to see a number of Academy grads who've been guests of yours. It really is cool to see how that institution's sent a lot of wonderful people to that community. I was one of the many who was inspired by the movie when I was 12 years old. I'm also inspired to follow the astronaut track. It's also been fun to listen to the podcast there, Bio, and here's how so many Tomcat aviators had that common thread as well as an inspiration to join the Tomcat community. Got to the Naval Academy, became a physics major, had no idea what a naval flight officer was, let alone a radar intercept officer, like most of us. My eyesight deteriorated pretty quickly being a physics major, as you can expect, and it went from 20/20 to 2200 like it felt overnight. And graduated with glasses, switched to contacts. Meanwhile, I learned about the F-14 RIO program, courtesy of a summer cruise with VF-41 that was deployed to Bosnia aboard the Roosevelt.
Your whole summer cruise was assigned to a fighter squadron?
I was assigned to VF-41. I absolutely was at OP Honors as the CO. My running mate was Virus Baker. I remember all the department heads. It was an action-packed summer cruise as a rising senior firstie at the Naval Academy. You couldn't have asked for anything better.
See, my rising senior summer cruise from ROTC, but we had a lot of Academy guys, was on the USS John F. Kennedy. Mm-hmm. But we were assigned to the ship, not to a squadron. So it would have been very cool to be to do a summer cruise in the squadron.
Yeah, and I feel so fortunate. And years later, of course, it doesn't matter if you're an Academy graduate or not. We all
right.
Ended up in the same spot, but. Boy, that I was so lucky to be attached to 41 during that time when O'Grady was shot down in his F-16. Remember that period? That was that era, that summer. It was a remarkable time to see the Tomcat community beginning to flex from that air-to-air supremacy role to the air-to-ground, really realizing it needed to transition to become the big strike and the little fighter. So I jumped into my first year, really enthusiastic about becoming a radar intercept officer. Got down to flight school, and boy, that was a transition from Annapolis down there join the rest of my friends from all around, from who actually had a real college experience and who helped us enjoy and transition our lives to Pensacola. It was a time when the A6 Intruder was retiring. We had a lot of instructors who just left the Intruder community as BNs who went to VT4, VT10, VT86 as their final tours in the Navy. And so for us, the A6 was no longer a selection. It was now P3s, S3s, E2s, of course, the Tomcat, and then the E6. And within a matter of months of primary, I was just inspired by the instructors that I had who were Tomcat RIOs to pursue that path, and was fortunate through the grace of God, honestly, because I was certainly not a standout flight school student to be selected to fly the Tomcat. And through that journey, met some just amazing Americans who today are still some of my best friends. And we all together moved to Oceana, a remarkable time in the Tomcat community that we didn't appreciate at the time. It was 1998. The entire Tomcat community had just consolidated to Oceana from Miramar. And at the same time, the F-14D community had shut down VF-124. And so VF-124 disappeared. That was the West Coast Replacement Squadron, for those that are not familiar. Which then the training was all at VF-101, the Grim Reapers in Oceana. So the Grim Reapers absorbed this F-14D thing that they had not been training in forever. It had always been a West Coast training squadron. And we, as a class, we put our selections in for which platform we wanted. It was A, B, or D. And for me, it was an easy choice. I wanted to fly the latest and the greatest, so I chose the D. And there were all sorts of, remember the reasons for choosing: home porting, home basing, deployment schedules. It was complicated. And I am so glad I got chose for the D community, because the F-14D, as I say, bio, and Crunch will appreciate this because he's got time in it. I'm a Naval Academy graduate. I was educated at the Naval Academy, but I was raised by the F-14D community. And I really do think that's true. And the cast of characters and legends and rock stars I'm serious. I stand on their shoulders tonight. And my hat's off to all of them that helped get me to where I grew through the Tomcat community and as a man in life. So I got the honor of selecting Ds, would ultimately graduate the RAG and move into the fleet in 1998. And I moved through VF2, and then after VF2, went through the Top Gun course in the summer of 2002. And after that, was assigned to the Strike Fighter Weapons School Atlantic, which is the successor to SWATSLANT that I know you've talked about in previous episodes. After my Swizzle tour in 2005, I had the great honor to be one of the last Tomcat training officer, along with Supa Fanley in VF-31 in 2005 and 2006. When I left, went to the Air Force Staff College, the Tomcat community had its sunset in 2006. I would then come back, moved on into the Super Hornet in a legacy F-14D squadron, the Black Alliance of VFA 213, made another deployment. And then the rest of my career was spent with JSOC, and then instructor of the Naval Academy, and then retired in 2017. And here I am talking about that great period of life with you great Americans.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, man, that was your career you and I shared a bit of sea time together in CAG 8 when you were in 31 as a training officer. I was at 213. We were in Ready 7. You were in Ready 8. We were all flying together. We had a great time over there. But I tell you what, aside from that, your career is like so much more different than mine. Yeah. And all the different things you've done. I'm like, I fly airplanes, and you like go out and do stuff. You did so much different. It's great.
Yeah.
But hey, we're here to talk about the F-14D and your experiences there. So we've already had Jungle Jones, who
right?
We've had Jungle on, and he talked about the D from the pilot's perspective. Now, there's some great things from the pilot's point of view. I have some D time. The big engines, you got the IRST to play with. The displays are awesome. Let's be honest, there's an awful lot in the back seat that is really cool on the F-14D. Give us give us the impression. What do you got? Not just the radar, but everything that comes to mind.
We'll break it out from the A. How did it improve on the A?
Yeah, Bio, that's a great way to help me answer the question. I've thought a lot about this. I'll tell you what separates the Delta from the A and the B was data integration and fusion. And the information fusion that occurred in the front and back seat and across the seats really differentiated the platform. So the sensors that were added.
Those terms were not even in our minds back in.
And that's great, Bio, because as Crunch was laying out the things you wanted to talk about, I'm like, oh crap! I wish I had saved a confidential sup because that.
Don't we all?
I know, right? And who knows where that thing's went?
Just show it real quick,
right? So I think really what made the F-14D really special, besides the maintainers that made it sing, that made the magic work, and the operators that really perfected the employment of all of the sensors. What made it different was how the sensors were integrated and how technology back in the early 90s began to allow us to do this. You had the APG-71 replacing the AUG-9. You had the IRST, the IRST, the infrared search track system that added this counter electronic attack system in a very infantile way. That became fully integrated. You had the Joint Tactical Information Distribution System, which was a data link, replacing the older Link 4 that was a generation leap in data exchange between aircraft. You had the legacy television camera system, the TCS, integrated into the fold. And then you began to layer in other things that we realized we needed to add that your other guests have mentioned or spoken, ad nauseam about. Lantern, integrated into the data set, the information exchange. You had things like TARPs integrated in. You had really niche systems like fast tactical imagery. You had things like TARPs IR, TARP that you had digital TARPs. You then had Rover integrated in the last deployment. So really, Bio, what I'll say is, as I began,
this is making me sad for the Tomcat community because they only made 55 of these beauties,
exactly. But they made 55, but those 55 hummed to the very end. And Crunch and I remember that in that deployment, no 5 and 6, the CAG-8 with Cy Sizemore as the last Tomcat Air Wing commander. Man, that was an amazing deployment where there was nothing more powerful and no better tribute to 40 years of Tomcat the amazing contribution of the Tomcat community than seeing 22 up F-14Ds flying off the TR back to NAS Oceana, all in an up condition, able to land.
That's
the struggle.
That's impressive. That is impressive. Yeah.
What's fun about that fun is when you can look at that picture of that last flyover, and I know you do this just like I do, is you look up and you go, I'm in that one right there.
Right.
That's
I was with Charlie Brown, who was one of our DHs in the trail aircraft, the photo aircraft, and the alignment aircraft. I do that too. That was a special time. And Bio, sort of, before we move to the next question, to answer your question of what made it special, it represented the greatest aspects of the entire F-14 community from the previous 40 years that culminated in an exceptionally combat capable aircraft in the air-to-ground mission and the air-to-air mission that integrated technology until the very bitter end in order to support our forces on the ground.
Yeah, very true. So let's dig into some of the details then. So a lot of our audience really likes the details.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the APG-71.
Yeah.
Compare and contrast to the AUG-9. Let's talk about all the details, like radar modes.
Yeah, start with the radar modes.
Where it came from, all sorts of stuff like that.
Again, boy, you guys have taxed my memory trying to go back and dig this out of the vault from many years ago. Here, bottom line, APG-71, what made it special? it took the AUG-9, which was an exceptional system for its time, and it improved it in every aspect, whether it was electronic attack, whether it was multi-modes, whether it was processing power, whether it was mode agility, whether it was functionality for the pilot. The APG-71 leveraged the Air Force development of the APG-70 for the F-15 program, and it Tomcat-ized it. And what resulted was a very capable long-range search detect radar compatible with the Phoenix, compatible with the AMRAAM, compatible which was upgradable for future technology, and importantly, it really improved the AUG-9's ability to counter electronic attack. And in the F-14D, provided with the data bus, the 1553 data bus, allowed the pilot and the RIO to interoperate the radar in ways the AUG-9 could never be.
So you bring up a good point. We used to talk a lot about the 1553 data bus, and that's a piece. That's the digital spine of the airplane that allows everything to communicate. Like you were saying, whereas that data fusion, that's what allowed that to happen. And that was a piece of equipment. That data bus didn't exist in the A and the B. No. It was only there in the F-14D. And I remember people would talk about that. I'm like, well, what's so important about this?
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden it hits me one time like, oh, look at this. Everything talks to each other and it works. And it's just like you said, that was probably, that I didn't even have that in my list of things that we wanted to talk about today. I'm so glad you brought it up because I had forgotten that was like one of the most important parts.
Well, for the nerds out there, like all Tomcat, F-14D RIOs are. No, I'm just kidding. I love comparing the F-14A and the F-14D, just like you'd compare the Grumman's Apollo module that landed on the moon to the IBM, 286 computers of the 1990s. I mean, that was a huge leap in technology, and that really is what drove the leap from the F-14A and B, the AUG-9 weapon system, to the APG-71 based mission computer, which remember Crunch, we had two IBM 286 compatible computers that drove that data bus. It was that computing power that allowed all of that data fusion and integration. That would be it was a monumental way to segue from the AUG-9 to the Super Hornet that we're now flying today, and the data integration and fusion that occurs there.
Well, and if viewers, okay, and I'm going to go over radar modes in just a second, but if people are watching and they're going, oh, a 286, that's all you had? Yeah. Well, they ought to remember one thing. The AUG-9 was designed in the 1960s, years before probably the 8086 was even imagined.
Yeah.
And it had a little magnetic tape read-in, and I used to know how many lines of code it had, but it was an incredibly primitive computer.
I think it had two lines of code. There was this air-to-air line of code, and there was the air-to-ground line of code.
And it was just one big line.
Okay, so the AUG-9 had pulse search, PD search, and track while scan. It had range while scan, but I don't know anybody that ever used it. So those were the three main modes, and then pulse search and PD search could go to STT. Yeah. So is that what the APG-71 had, and how did MPRF? I'm going to bring out the MPRF question.
Yeah.
So let's go over the modes and then bring in MPRF.
Yeah. The answer is yes. And before we talk about the beeps and squeaks, let me mention the people that made this happen, because and this is important for a reason. The guys and it's just was happened to be a bunch of guys back then. Stewie Stewart and a number of other key figures built the F-14D program in concept with, the program office and put the requirements together for it. And one of them was to build the APG-71 weapon system in the image of the AUG-9 system, so that the operators could move between one to the other. And the idea was the community was used to track while scan, pulse Doppler search, pulse search, and like you said, even a range while search option. Let's take that. Let's modernize it in the way that Hughes radar could, that they were doing for the Eagle program, and let's Tomcatize it and move it into the F-14D. So those people, again, I'm standing on their shoulders here, and I hope Stewie's watching this because he ended up being my first skipper. I have so much respect for him and what he did to launch the F-14D program back in the day. And it was great that, I didn't appreciate his contribution. And there were others, whether it's Grumpy Kimberly. My gosh, I'm beginning to blank on some of the names, but all the folks who
it only gets worse.
Yeah, right. And so all these people who influenced the operational test design of the whole APG-71 operating system over the years. So track wall scan was the core weapons employment function of the APG-71. It had the same modes. It had a 65, 40, 20, 10 degree, and then in terms of the antenna scan, and then a 1, 2, 4, and 8 bar design for the scanning. What the APG-71 did is what it added was, which was significant, was a medium PRF capability. PRF meaning a pulse repetition frequency. As an F-14D youngster, I took this for granted until I began to fly the F-14A, which was only a high and low PRF mode aircraft. And we'll get to the displays next, but in terms of just the processing abilities of the APG-71, what it fixed, I shouldn't say fixed, what it improved on over the AUG-9 was a all aspect capability system and in multi-mode capability, particularly in an electronic attack environment. So where the AUG-9 was a high or low PRF for a high velocity, high rate of closure versus a receding target. What the APG-71 added was medium PRF, which was an ideal medium range mode for all aspect detection, and it interleaved that. And the interleave.
Okay, so you say it's a medium range mode.
Yeah,
but it was Did the RIO select MPRF? Did because the modes? I mean, when you in the AUG-9, when you say low PRF, you're talking pulse,
right?
When you say high PRF, you're talking PD and track wall scan.
The beauty.
And then I've looked at my Hughes radar book that I have back there, Introduction to Airborne Radar, and it says the statement, medium PRF is actually not the numerical value of the PRF. It is a term that refers to the processing of radar signals. That's an unclassified book.
This is
okay. So you're talking about medium PRF modes. Mm-hmm. Did the radar automatically do that? Did the RIO push a medium?
Yeah, and I've been looking forward to saying this for about 15 years. The Top Gun recommendation is to run the APG-71 in an interleave track wall scan 40-degree 2-bar mode. So
did you select interleaved?
You did.
Or was that
default on the RIOs? We call it the DD panel, the digital display. There were 3 options: high, interleave, and medium PRF. Now, I believe it was interleave, high, medium, interleave. Interleave allowed the system to alternate between a high PRF and a medium PRF scan. And that meant the entire scan volume was sanitized in both a high and medium PRF. And
excellent.
Obviously, track wall scan is not a low PRF mode. So if you needed that, you could just roll right to a pulse search mode.
Okay. Man, fun. You just answered. That's a big fundamental question. That's good. Thanks.
I am digging deep in the vault up here. I mean, this is.
Hey, Crunch, do you have anything else? I'm good.
I'm just sitting back and enjoying the show. This is why we called fun.
Yeah, I appreciate that because I could talk about this stuff for hours. Apparently,
so what our listeners don't realize is that when I showed up in the D community, I already had a couple thousand hours, 1,500 hours flying something else, right? And I showed up and I'm like, hey. Finger guns. I'm here. I'm happy to fly this newfangled airplane with the big motors, and here's fun. And he's like, hey, there's this JTIDS and all this stuff. I'm like, all right, well, man, it's kind of confusing. Is there anybody know about this stuff? And Fun would hand you this big giant folder of frequently asked questions. It was all colored like blue and red and all sorts of stuff. And it was page after page after page of just wisdom. And I was like, dang. There's some good stuff in there. And it was one of those things where I'm like, Okay, I had no idea there was so much to know about this airplane. So I just remember that you had like the Bible that you wrote, and it was just like your notes, right?
I do recall that. It was called Frequently Asked Questions. And it started with like that one, two, three questions. And I realized that Confidential Sup and all our pubs they didn't cover anything that we really wanted to know about this one system in the F-14D.
So just let me tell you, I mean, I did not write the FAQs, and hats off to you for doing that, because that sounds like an excellent, I mean, a great thing to do and a great initiative. But when I was a new JO in 1981 in my first squadron, there were certain elements of the A that people just didn't understand, and they just were like, they just didn't care. And some of them were explained in the confidential supplement. And this pilot I was flying with, he and I said, let's become smart on these. I mean, one of them was the damn ALE 39 chaff and flare dispenser.
Yeah.
People just nobody cared about it because everybody was interested in, the sexy, missiles and stuff. Anyway, so there's always stuff about the Tomcat that they didn't have time to teach you at the RAG, or maybe you didn't. Anyway, but fun. Good on you for figuring it out and writing the FAQs. That's cool. Obviously, you helped at least one guy.
I mean, right? And at least one person read it. That, to be honest, that was when I got to the weapons school. This is back in 2002. The Super Hornet was all the rage. A lot of effort being put into advanced transitioning all of the F-18 legacy community's knowledge to that community, especially since the B squadrons were in the A squad, the Tomcat A squadrons were all transitioning to that platform too. So I got put into become the F-14D system SME for the remaining two squadrons. It was, it was an opportunity more than anything else to take ownership of the Link 16 program that the Super Hornet community and the Hornet community didn't know anything about. And so and this is under the leadership of Dan Redgate, who was the weapons school CO at the time. He saw the writing on the wall, and I think Puck Howe was there too, who was a D guy. They were just like, hey, fun, a little bit about this. Go take this program, run with it, make some magic happen, figure it out, and see what we need to do. And it was 2002. The attacks of 9/11 had just happened. We were so behind in integrating NAS Oceania and our Tomcats and our Hornets into the national, the data link infrastructure that we were building to protect the country against an attack on the homeland that we, thank goodness never came. But
but everybody thought it could be next week. Yeah.
So all that stuff it existed, and as a weapons school instructor, it was a real honor to get involved in all that, and then integrate the F-18 community based on all the lessons learned from the F-14 community. And that's
good. That's good. Okay, so Crunch made this comment when we were comparing notes, getting ready for this. He said the WRAs were reduced in half,
right,
for the APG-71. Was that kind of something that you learned also? I mean, is that a pretty accurate statement? And did you guys have really good availability for the 71?
So I've read that. That certainly wasn't something that as a JO I was ever in tune with. It's not like you're dealing with, a WRS on a daily basis. However, you became pretty astute with the troubleshooting involved. And while WRAs were reduced, I think troubleshooting the APG-71 was a lot easier than the AUG-9. It could the bits you could run were a lot more they were a lot more effective. So I think than the random stuff you would do at the AUG-9. So I think from the maintainer's perspective, maintaining the APG-71, while it was still a lot of work, was a lot easier than the AUG-9.
Okay, that's good.
So if I can interrupt real quick, WRA, refresh me, weapons replacement assembly?
Weapons replaceable assembly.
Right.
It's a black box that they plug out. And
basically little computers. Right?
Exactly.
All right.
Yeah, and but so in the AUG-9, they were more like little hamster wheels with brushes and copper wire and stuff like that.
Fair enough. So you had So you had, I think, I hate to make up a number, but I think there was a whole bunch of WRAs, meaning little computers for an OG9.
Yeah.
The system was analog. When they uploaded the software, they had to load in a tape, just like in the 1970s or 80s, whenever you were playing a video game at home, you have to put the cassette in and load it. That's how they loaded the software. You had to do that every time you flew, right? I mean, it would sit there and take a while to load. Well, I mean, you didn't have to feed it in, but it took a while to read into the
you pushed
memory.
the button and it took, yeah.
How long did it take in the OG9?
I don't even remember because it was just part of the startup sequence. But
right.
if you
APG 71, the D didn't. It was everything was fast. It was digital.
All right. It took us, and
you have fewer WRAs. Everything's solid state, right? So it doesn't break. It's more reliable. It's fewer parts. You also mentioned bits. What's running a bit?
Oh, built-in test.
Pretend I'm a pilot who sits in the front who never actually ran a bit in his life.
Fun. Did you guys have fly catchers?
We didn't have fly catchers in the sense the AUG9 did. We did have, as we started the jet, Crunch will remember this, I believe it was called OBC.
Yeah, onboard checkout.
Onboard checkout. And was that on the AUG9 as well?
Yeah. Yep.
And we had, thank you. I don't think we had fly catchers per se. We had them. I think we used them differently.
Okay, so let's answer the bit question. The bit question is there were like 8 bits. They were called built-in test, and they tested different things. One tested the antenna, for example,
right.
And some of them were short and some of them were long. One of them tested the transmitter, bit 3, and some of them set thresholds. So if you're going, I mean, it's so fun. Tell me if this was like this in 71. We used to always run. Be sure you run like bit 3 or whatever it was. Be sure you run this at the start of the flight as soon as you get airborne. You had to do it airborne because the transmitter couldn't operate on the ground. And it would set thresholds and stuff. And then you'd run them at the end of the flight and write down all this crap until maintenance. So did you guys do that with bits?
Bio, because you guys did that for 30 years before us? No, we didn't have to. That was built into the software. So what we did, we did.
So you guys had time to take a nap when you're going home. I mean, I'm back there.
Hardly that. No, not at all, sir. I was resetting mission computers with circuit breakers and doing all sorts of other craziness. But I'll tell you, we did have bits, and it was driven by 2 IBM 286 equivalent computers. We flew with a bit book that was, I recall it being a little 2-inch by 4-inch thing, a lot like yours in the
I have one, yeah.
And it was a series of bits that you could run based on the system issue that you had, typically with the APG 71, sometimes with the others, and it would give you a result, and it would light debrief maintenance better. Oh my gosh, look at that right there. Look at that.
So the folks on audio only right now, Bio is holding up this old bit book. You got to go to YouTube and see this thing.
That's
this
incredible.
Is amazing.
That is about to fall.
This was the new one, 1997. I've got one from the 1980s back in my other bag.
Right. So it's good.
But it's got, you get these codes and it says no transmitter on signal.
Right.
And then it tells you to run all this other stuff. And then you tell that to the AQs, which used to be AQs, then they became AEs. And they could go, oh, if you have that problem, you're supposed to change this, And I mean, this was just, Okay.
We used every system, every WRA and the F-14D was, had equivalent bits as well. And so whether it was JTIDS, the IRST, the TCS, all of it was driven by the data bus. So you could,
that's new.
You could troubleshoot anything. And it wasn't necessarily troubleshooting. You could run a bit. You could find out what an issue was with a system with that and then come back and debrief maintenance. The APG 71, probably like the AUG9, was either, it either, I hate to say it either worked or it didn't work. It either full up worked, it worked without STTs working, or it didn't work. And I think that was just the nature of the actuated antenna and the age of the aircraft. That STT functionality seemed to be the most the most temperamental of any.
Yeah, we had those. Okay, I want to ask 2 more questions, Crunch, about the radar. And fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if these will be kind of short, hopefully, and then we'll move on to the other systems because I want to know about Earth also. Okay, 1, the AUG-9, even in track while scan, which was good overland, and I mean the philosophy on radar modes also changed over time. I saw it, but the AUG-9 would show false targets overland in track while scan. Not a lot, but often enough that if you saw a target in track while scan, you had to evaluate it. So did the APG-71 present false targets? Oh, so maybe that goes back to the interleaf thing. Did you guys have false targets in your PD mode, in track while scan?
The answer is a lot less. So the radar was designed with a reduced side lobe, kind of like spillover.
Yeah.
And those side lobes in AUG-9 were what caused all those false tracks. And so the APG-71 by design reduced the side lobe energy, and the interleave, the medium PRF functionality, just gave and the better processing power, it reduced a lot more of those false tracks.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to F-15 pilots, and they said if they see something on the radar, it's there.
Oh, absolutely. And
that's F-15.
Right. The nice thing with the AUG-9 though, Bio, is that, and to your great credit, is that RIO's back, and I learned this in Top Gun. Like, oh my gosh, being a AUG-9 RIO was work. I mean, you were running that B scope, which was for those who don't know, it was a negative return on a positive display. You could literally tune the gain, the fidelity. I mean, you were able to control all of the physical features of that radar. The APG-71 added the digital flavor to that system. And with anything that transitions analog to digital, you lose control over the functionality. You give it to the computer. And so the APG-71 had a digital display. Everything was processed. There was less that you could do to manipulate the actual system. And the Top Gun recommendations generally were to leave everything in the computer detent. So you would leave it into the APG-71's hands. There were very few things that you would want to do to manipulate the radar. So and look at today where we're dealing with the phased array ESA radar and the Super Hornets. I mean, you don't touch a thing. And that's great and wonderful when it's working. We forget where we have come from, and that not 40, 50 years ago, it was folks like you who were back there tuning the dials, making it work.
Well, and I had the giants whose shoulders I stood on. Tom Hyatt, Darth Kane, those guys who were my RAG instructors and my mentors in the squadron. Okay, one last question then. Pulse search. Did you guys ever use pulse search overland?
So pulse search was really not. I mean, pulse search was a novelty, to be quite honest. But it wasn't needed with range well search, medium PRF. You never needed pulse search. Range well search and medium PRF. I would run around in 65 4-bar, and you would see everything when you tuned it well. So no, we only use pulse search in the air to ground mapping mode. In the later the F-14D tapes, we had a ground map mode that Crunch will remember. That was, it was not a synthetic aperture radar. It had you'd see things the size of a school bus maybe, or a building, but it was the precursor to today's high fidelity ground search mapping radar. So that was a pulse search mode system with high processing required.
Yeah. That makes sense.
We never used pulse search like you guys did on
air
a
to air, right?
Yeah.
Fun. Man, what a great overview of the 71. I mean, and comparing it to the AUG-9. That is awesome.
It's a walk down memory lane for sure.
It's also just just a case study of what technology and continuous improvement can do. And like the guys you said who made the 71 and the D. But we got all these other cool systems.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the IRST.
Yeah.
All right. So the IRST, IR search and track, right? So what is it, and why is it so cool? Why did we care?
Infrared search track. It is an infrared sensor infused in with the APG-71 and the weapon system that allowed the Tomcat to have a denied attack capability, meaning the APG-71's radar could be electronically attacked, denied a range target, and the IRST could thermally detect an airborne track at, probably up to 200, maybe 300 miles, could correlate it with the APG-71, allowing us to do a missile attack on a range unknown target with a Phoenix missile. That was the whole idea behind the IRST. So it was a electronic attack dream to kind of mitigate the challenges the AUG-9 had in that environment.
Yeah, and as I recall, you could do a track while scan mode on the IRST.
Mm-hmm.
It could track those targets. It would basically. Ooh, I just moved my microphone. Probably made some noise there, but it could track those targets. Basically, take an STT on them, and if memory serves, if you had a couple of targets, you could take an offset, and as you generated the range, it could calculate a rough estimate of the range for that IR track, correct? Do I have that right?
You do. I remember that too. That was it was a series of to gimbal left and right turns, and it would use the shift of that IR track and then predict it on the APG-71 on the TID and our TSD that you recall the pilots would use. And then you'd have a range undefined track become a rough ranged track where you could lob an active Phoenix missile into.
So how is the symbology? Did you, as a RIO, did an IRST target? I mean, because a great radar track is totally different than what you just said, a calculated range off of an IR.
Right.
Did you have a very clear designation of what's what? So
yeah. So from what I recall we had two different displays. We had the TID, which all Tomcat RIOs remember. The pilots in the F-14D had the TSD, the Tactical Situation Display. The symbology was virtually the same, although I'll say the TSD allowed the pilot to manipulate so many of the IRST, JTIDS Link 16, and some of the APG-71 modes. The radar, the track, the symbology was exactly the same as the AUG-9.
Okay.
IRST would overlay a track at approximately a third, call it a third of your range scale on the TID, and it gave you, I think it was it looked something like a letter K. I can't exactly recall it, or I'd turn to my confidential sub, and it basically implied that there is a range undefined IR track, and you could,
all right, cool,
you could correlate it if you had a radar track, and then the IRST was there. The APG-71 weapon system, though, would do that by itself. It would correlate same bearing on a radar track, and then it would tie those two. It would tie those two together. Adding Link 16. You could, from the E2 linking that same track, it would create a box, and the box with a velocity vector implied, a complete track, just like the Link 4 days. So the IRST gave you confidence in a track, and in an electronic attack denied environment, it gave you sometimes the only SA.
Sure.
And then sometimes, you had really proficient pilots with you who would race the RIO to find a target out there, particularly in a turn or out of the notch, and you grew pretty proficient with that too.
That's right. And the other thing that it allowed you to do is you might on your radar be looking at a group, and a group has a certain number of tracks within it, a certain number of airplanes. So airplanes in close formation, you may not be able to break them out on the radar because they're within that resolution, right? Whereas on the IRST, a lot of times you'd be able to break out the raid count on that group.
Right.
And say, ooh, eyeball 2, whereas on the radar, you're only seeing 1.
Yeah.
Right. So you might actually be able to break those 2 out and say, eyeball 2, and then you can sort between your wingman and you, or basically be prepared to lob one missile in there and know that you're going to have one live guy coming at you afterwards. So
that was neat stuff. That was exactly right. And if you recall, range wall search on the APG-71 allowed you a pretty good raid count too. Where track wall scan sometimes didn't. So it was that agility between range wall search, track wall scan, IRST track wall scan, all together that really allowed you to break out count in a group.
That's right. And now, could you shoot? You said that you could shoot on an IRST only track. Is that right? With an AIM 54, but not an AIM 7.
I believe so, only because AIM 7
Yeah.
didn't have an active mode. And I really think in range unknown shot with a Phoenix, I mean, it had to be an active only mode shot.
Yeah.
No. By the time, because I remember that. Because when I was at Top Gun, one of the things that we taught was how to enter a range. I don't want to talk too much more, but the Phoenix knows it can take off on a profile based on an estimated range, but it does not come off active.
Got it.
So
Okay, you're talking about something that I'm like, ooh, there's some cobwebs in there.
Yeah, we're not going.
Yeah,
I don't have to talk anymore about that.
But the door just shut. I lost it. Well, okay, so fun, so great stuff. So we're talking about, we've got the APG 71, we got the IRST, everything's linking through the might have a TCS track, everything's talking through the 1553 data bus, and maybe you employ a missile, and bang, let's bring JTIDS into the picture. What is JTIDS? What does it bring to the fight?
JTIDS brought to the Tomcat community, I would say, it's not just Link 4 times 4 for the older Tomcat crowd. It brought global situational awareness when it was pumped into the network. And what JTIDS brought was a secure line of sight, targeting, threat exchange capability to the F-14D that in the mid-late 90s was cutting edge.
Yeah. Well, it's still incredible today.
Exactly.
I mean, when you think about it.
Exactly.
So you just mentioned something. You got Link 4. We're talking Link 16. There's also Link 11.
Yeah.
Can you give us stop me if I'm like, oh wow, I'm sure I'm not. What's the difference between Link 4, Link 11, and Link 16?
Oh boy, this is okay. Good. We could talk about this for a while. Let me boil this down. So Link 4 is a low data rate, unsecure exchange of basic information between ship and aircraft or ship to ship. Think of it is the 1970s and 1980s version of a data exchange. Link 11 is a higher data rate data link to share targeting information primarily between ships. That is, I think it's encrypted, and it just allowed positioning information, threat information, but it did not allow anything such as like weapons engagement of a track file. What Link 16 brought was a secure line of sight means for aircraft, ships, tanks, doesn't matter, anybody with a transmitter and receiver to exchange target quality information in a time slot allocated network that was time synced and also provided unique capabilities like a voice capability that other data links did not. So what JTIDS offered the Tomcat was not just a means to exchange fighter-to-fighter tracks. Today, those are weapons quality engagement tracks in the Super Hornet and the F-35. For us, it allowed us to exchange ground tracks where there was a threat in the ground, where an insurgent location was, where a tank was. And it allowed us to talk in a secure voice, not just on one channel, but two channels. So it gave the Tomcat the ability to have 4 different radio systems: UHF-1, UHF-2, J-Voice Alpha, and J-Voice Bravo.
And it was secure, so you could say anything you wanted.
It was secure. The system had
Was it reliable and clear and effective and all that? Because early secure radio modes were not that good.
So I found it to be, it was crystal clear voice, and so the voice was very clear. The long pole intent was the crypto and sometimes the time synchronization. And if you recall, Crunch, we loaded 2 days of crypto.
That's right. I forgot about that.
So we loaded 0 or 1, we called it, but it was really today's crypto and tomorrow's crypto so that it could move through Zulu rollover. And that's why,
which would occur when?
Right? Who knew when? But
right. It always happened in the middle of your flight.
Middle of your flight, yeah, of course.
So I flew. Here I am in Top Gun, rolling in an F-14A. I think they were VF-41 F-14As, and we're using Link 4, and I'm like, man, this is so reliable. It works all the time. And it's like you turn it on, and there you're exchanging fighter-to-fighter tracks. The F-14D and JTIDS was a much more complicated system because you had to line up the correct crypto. You had to line up the correct time. And remember, GPS was a brand new thing back in the 90s. The idea of synchronizing to GPS Zulu time was, mind-blowing back then. And that's what you began to do. So you just introduced more variables that obviously could lead to failure. But once you got everything lined up and things began to hum, Link 16 gave a tremendous amount of situational awareness to not just you, but to anybody else in the network that could then see what you saw.
Yeah.
Okay,
So you bring up.
Go ahead, Crunch.
Go ahead, Bio.
Nope, you first.
Well, I was going to say, you bring up an interesting point. You talk about the time sync, and I remember that there would be times where all of a sudden you would start to lose sync. Like you would start, like your voice transmission start to get choppy. You were like, oh, we're dropping out of sync.
Yeah. And
somebody would have to send I can't remember what it's called, the data as time chirp. What was it called?
On JTIDS?
No. You would just send out a
You're thinking about the Mickey on a
Mickey. Yes, somebody would send a Mickey, and it'd either be one of the fighters or an E2 or the AWACS or something like that, because we weren't always using GPS time, especially in the beginning. We would just use it whatever was locally, and whoever owned the time, it didn't have to be synced to GPS. If I set the time sync and I sent the Mickey, bang, I set the network, and in theory, anybody who joined that network, as long as they had the time sync, you could go all the way around the world with this network if you just had somebody in between you, right? I mean, it was just a matter of that time sharing thing.
Yeah, and that was the advent of network centric warfare, and those concepts. Man, this is a blast in the past. Though we in Iraq, Crunch, during that 2005 cruise, the last Tomcat deployment, if you recall, the overland Link 16 network was Zulu time. The ship's network, I believe, maybe it was the one or the other. The ship's network was Zulu -5, and the reason was because we couldn't have two network time references in close proximity, and so those kind of nuances, Bio, they really make Link 16 a very challenging system to operate. But
awesome!
Our weapon systems operators today flying these Super Hornets. They are doing amazing work in very complicated environments where they're the words they use that we wouldn't understand. I mean, they're just.
I agree with that. Okay. Before we get too far away, I want to talk about the F-14A.
Yeah.
So, Crunch, do you want to come in, or do you want to go over the F-14A?
I was going to dig into the nerddom of network time references and time syncs and all sorts of stuff. And I was going to drag fun into this rabbit hole all the way down to Alice's Wonderland. So you go ahead, Bio. Recover us, bring us back to the surface.
So you when you went to Top Gun, you had what, 700 hours in the D maybe, and no hours in the A, and then you're thrown into the A to go through Top Gun?
Bio, let's put it this way. So I had 2 deployments under my belt. In the D, I get
that's 1,000 hours.
I get thrown into an A. Well, it wasn't that many. I think it was a couple hundred. Maybe it was 500 or 600.
Old days.
2 deployments in a constellation. Come back, get thrown into the A. My first couple flights are all air to air. My pilot's Mike Horn, call sign Fog, and Fog was an F-14B guy. So we have a B guy and a D guy flying an A. What could go wrong? So we have our air-to-air flights are going okay, and we get to our first air-to-ground flight, and I had no experience in the air-to-ground environment in the F-14A, such that when we execute this roll, we're carrying like 2 Mark 82s. We roll into the target somewhere, at a Fallon. And all I hear Fog saying is like, I got no symbology. He's from Texas. I got no symbology. I'm like, what do I need to do back here? And I had never learned that there was actually a button you needed to press in the AUG-9 to transition the tape load from air to air to air to ground. So he rolls off the target, no drop, and then we come back and we debrief. And I'm like, what happened to the aircraft? I'm debriefing maintenance. Yeah, the air to ground mode didn't work. And Fog turns to me and he's like, and he thought I was trying to read the tape. It took us the entire debrief for me to learn that there's actually an air-to-ground reading requirement for the F-14A. So Bio, I had so much to learn about how the F-14A worked.
And that's not a quick thing, because we used to sit there, and that used to be one of those things where I'm reading in air to ground. And you had to basically announce that you're doing this because we are shifting at this point.
5 seconds later or whatever, 8, what I don't even remember how many.
And so imagine my surprise being used to the data, the fast update of the APG-71 system, where there was no transition. The pilot switched the HUD from air to air to air to ground, but there was no mode, I believe, Crunch, based on the weapons you were selecting. There was no. So for me, boy, that blew my mind when I learned that there was actually the tape physically shifted in the F-14A to provide the air-to-ground capability.
Welcome to the 1960s.
Yeah, right. But that was F-14D appreciation.
But you guys had, you got through it, and your pilot's flying with TF-30s and you're using the AUG-9 and going through Top Gun.
Well, it was then advanced a few flights to our 1v1 grad flight. We merged the Guard F-16, and I know Fogg's probably listening to this, and Fogg, it's still one of my greatest memories of all of our Top Gun time together. All of a sudden, we're in a scissors, and it was boom, the aircraft exploded around us, and I thought we were going to die. And all I hear Fogg is saying is like, I got it. And we just had a compressor stall, and I have never been through a compressor stall in my GE F-110 motors. I didn't know what that felt like. We came back to debrief. We knocked it off. Came back to Fallon, and the Guard pilot actually had it on his HUD, and I'd never seen that the explosion of a.
Oh, you're kidding!
In a compressor, yeah. That was F-14A appreciation flight number 2.
I didn't have that many compressor stalls in my entire career in the A. And I never had any that had explosive flames come out the front. I heard about them, but anyway. Huh. Cool. Okay. Well, you guys made it. That's good. Yeah. So so it made you appreciate the D. That's good.
It did. I mean, but the course, as boy, it was fundamentals, and the fundamentals, transition anywhere. And, bringing those back to the F-14D will make any RIO, any F-18 Super Hornet Wizzo a better operator, because of all of the fundamentals that you focus on. And it made me appreciate JTIDS, the IRST, median PRF, and all of those things as well.
Oh, that's terrible, man! You couldn't all those tools that would have helped you in those challenging. Yeah. Oh well.
So we were talking a whole bunch of good stuff there. Let's so one of the things, let's circle back to JTIDS. There were a couple of things I wanted to talk about. We talked about the time sync and all that stuff. Basically, it's almost like you would share the data through the network. And basically, you had an allocated time slot that you could transmit and receive. Do I have that correct?
Yeah. The best way to compare JTIDS to communications we're used to today. Your cell phone uses something called CDMA, Core Division Multiple Access. What that allows is a large number of operators to connect to a wireless frequency-driven network and to communicate without using a time synchronization. So CDMA is used by cell phone providers worldwide. What JTIDS uses, Link 16 uses, is something called time division multiple access. The difference is that each user is allotted time slots to drive their information so they can transmit and receive, meaning you need a time synchronization source. We're all going to use Zulu time, for example, and that allows me to share, my location in time slot 1 and my weapons information in time slot 45. And you're going to do the same in time slot 3 and time slot 47, and Bio is going to do it in different ones. So that's what TDMA is for Link 16. The importance of that is that it adds a layer of security to it, meaning you not only need to be on the same crypto, which does because crypto drives our frequency hopping. It also, you need to be on the same time sync, the same time stamp in order to make that data exchange happen. So in a nutshell, JTIDS operates a lot like your cell phone does. It's just a lot more secure and can share information more reliably.
You know what?
At
I
the-
never bothered to understand that. So thank you guys for explaining that to me.
and at the same time, there's a finite number of slots available.
Correct. In bio, you can find this all on page 10 to page 13 of the frequently asked questions on.
I don't have my
Not
copy
in your
here.
library. Not in your library.
Not in my library.
So
That's online, right? No.
So you can tell I actually did read Fun's frequently asked questions because a lot of this stuff is in there, and I'm like,
Crunch,
oh yeah,
you
thinking about it.
retain that stuff.
Things
I'm
will never live
impressed.
down. Things will never live down.
Yeah, no, but the reason I remember this because it was such an impressive feat. I say that and go, wow. I mean, think about it. I'm right now talking about things that I read in your little document that I didn't read it anywhere else. I read it in your document.
Yeah, but for a Navy JO, lieutenant, whatever, to put together something like that, I mean, that's good. A lot of guys talk about it. Oh, somebody ought to, but you did it. So that's good. Good on you.
Yeah. But now, so you got a finite number of time blocks.
Right.
At some point, you have too many people trying to get into the network to share their information, right?
You could.
What happened?
No, this is boy, this is the nerdiest stuff we're going to talk about tonight.
Well, we can stop if you want.
Yeah,
I find this stuff fascinating.
Crunch, I'm going to tell Scott to remove all this anyway. So no, I'm kidding.
No, you're not.
I really don't care because I got a lot of grief back then when I became the JTIDS SME for the Tomcat and the Super Hornet world because making it work took understanding these beeps and squeaks, and it really here's what it came down to, bio, making these very sophisticated data links combat relevant for the Tomcat and now the Super Hornet and the Joint Strike Fighter requires that our junior officers can speak to the network programmers out in China Lake. And believe it or not, Crunch, I mean, all that those frequently asked questions, my go-to sources were all of the 100-pound brains over out at China Lake at an organization called Naval Center for Tactical Systems Interoperability that literally wrote the code for our networks. And they would take the requirements for like OIF was a great example. OIF had 3 F-14D squadrons in the same patch of Earth, plus a number of Strike Eagle squadrons. You began layering in all the JTIDS Link 16 users. Those guys collaborated with their Army, their Air Force counterparts, and developed a network that had 1,536 time slots. Write that one down. And they allocated all the time slots to the different platforms and all the different capabilities. And it is really difficult work to do all that. That took understanding what the capabilities in theater were, what the different capabilities that each aircraft was going to use, et cetera, et cetera. And it took junior officers who could speak the language, who could come to the table and say, our platform is going to need to exchange this kind of information in the network. And then that's where the magic happens.
You got to have operators involved, and operators have to understand. So
absolutely. And that was the sophistication that the war in Iraq really brought us to is, it taught the Super Hornet community that you can't just let the developers and the network designers do this in a vacuum. They've got to understand what the warfighters need.
Yeah.
Okay, did you guys carry lantern on every flight?
We did
over in theater. Was it the same pod we had? We had lantern in the A model, my final deployment, and it was awesome.
By the time I got to the Tomcat community, 98. We began. Not every Tomcat had a lantern, but by the time I left VF2 in 2002. I think enough of the legacy Tomcat squadrons had retired that there were enough lanterns to go around. And so the last, say, 7-8 years of the Tomcat community, Crunch, back me up on this, but you couldn't find a Tomcat without a lantern on it.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't that there was one for every airplane so much as there was one for every airplane that was on the roof and ready to go flying. And so they would have to move them around at times, as I recall, which was a bigger job than you would think, which makes sense. But I remember thinking that there were some airplanes that didn't have it, but I could be wrong. I was only the maintenance officer. What would I know about these things?
Now we're going to talk about lantern in another episode. So I think it's coming up shortly. It's scheduled to come in a few episodes after this one. So we don't need to go into detail on lantern, but before I forget, did you guys do tarps also?
We did tarps. We did.
Oh yeah,
tarps.
you were saying there was a lot of other fast or other improvements of tarps or something
Yeah.
like that.
So in a nutshell, we ran traditional tarps, we ran digital tarps, we ran tarps IR. Really until the tarps program ended, which ended a couple of years before the Tomcat community retired. So I don't think we deployed with tarps in the last deployment.
I don't remember that.
Okay.
We did deploy. I mean, but Lantern by then in the F-14D was providing the same level of imagery that tarps was. And I'll tell you, the Lantern integration in the F-14D continued to evolve through the last tape load. And so there were some really sophisticated capabilities that Lantern provided, particularly with the RIO interface. For example, one of the things I missed when I transitioned to the Super Hornet was the ability to queue. It was called QDES. Crunch might remember this. QDES
Yes.
was this ability where you could designate something on the ground in Lantern, you could move to something else, and then you could return to that point. That's an example of very operator-driven modifications to the F-14D's Lantern integration that the software developers were able to implement very rapidly into the last couple tape loads that really advanced that capability. And when I transitioned to the AT FLIR and the Super Hornet, I was really surprised that a number of these key user features that we as Tomcat RIOs had evolved in the Tomcat just weren't in the AT FLIR integration. So as I made that my 2008-9 VFA 213 deployment, I missed the Lantern integration in the F-14D. It gave a wider field of view. It gave more. The PTID was now the new digital display in the backseat. They replaced the TID. It gave a
we had PTIDs back in 97, 98.
It a better picture. It was just a much better interface than I think the AT FLIR initially was in that Super Hornet.
Okay, so what about the rest of the Super Hornet? I mean, I'm not trying to totally trash the Super Hornet because, I mean, that became the Navy's fighter, so I hope it was a decent airplane. But how about the radar and everything else? Was it good?
Here's how I compare it, and we all get asked this question.
Okay, good.
The Super Hornet is the Super Hornet is a fantastic air superior, strike fighter. It offers the detection capability that the APG-71 never could provide with the phased array radar. It offers the air-to-ground munitions flexibility that in terms of types of weapons that the Tomcat community dreamed of. It offers the electronic attack and protection, that data exchange, the data link exchange that the Tomcat community could never get to because of this. We couldn't upgrade the Tomcat anymore. What it suffers from, though, is that it's a subsonic fighter, in that it could never carry the payloads that the Tomcat could carry. You're
not the first person to say that on this show, so let me just tell you.
And I've heard that from others. So that was where you really missed. You missed the F-14D with the big motors and rolling up into Baghdad with 3 2,000-pound GBU-31s JDAM that we dropped with one pickle, and you took out an entire presidential guard compound in downtown Baghdad and then returned to the ship safely. You couldn't do that in the Super Hornet. And never mind that we exited Iraq as a 2-ship of Tomcats at Mach 1.1, and our Hornet brothers never even made it in the country because of bad weather. They couldn't climb over. So there were limitations with the Super Hornet, but those are mitigated, I think, with its advanced sensor technology and the data link capability, and obviously now with its partner, the Joint Strike Fighter, that has a lot of capability too.
Very interesting answer. Thank you. Crunch, we have a couple other questions.
Yeah, let's see here. I got a few left here. Let's rear cockpit layout.
Yeah.
You mentioned it a little bit. I mean, the DD versus the DDD. There's a few things. The buttons are different. You got time in both. What aside from a few of the buttons and the labels, how different is the back seat
So
of the
Crunch,
D?
when you say both, you mean the A and the D, or you mean the D and the Super Hornet?
I meant the A and the D, but
Okay.
sure. Let's talk about all of them.
Oh
So
boy.
yeah,
Why not?
Oh boy.
cockpit layout, functionality.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
here's the differences. Let's talk A, B, and then D to the Super Hornet F. The AB, big difference between the AB and the D was the digital design that allowed data entry. The cat panel of the F-14 of the AUG-9 that was that roller wheel of mode selection in the back seat. It was like when I began to fly that bio in the Top Gun course, I'm like, I think we're going to land on the moon tomorrow. I mean, this is like, what's going on here? Like, hey, we're going to, go for the moon. And it was, row that thing around and push the button and like hope that the letters came up on the TID. The APG-70,
That was the future when it was new, man.
I know. Well, the F-14D took that and it rolled that into what we called the what is that called? The data entry unit was the DEU, I believe. The DEU on the.
I've heard of that. DEU.
DU. It was just called the DU.
It was just called the DU, right? It was above the RIO's right knee. And this was literally a push button driven digital entry display where you could enter everything from coordinates to symbology, letters and numbers, anything that required letters and numbers, and data modes, and you could pull menus up. It was the RIO's interface with the aircraft, but it was also backed up with, the MFDs, and our multifunctional displays were 5x5s that allowed us to pull up on we called it MFD3. In the back seat, the pilot had MFD number 1 and MFD number 2. And on the MFD number 3, the RIO and the pilot could pull up the same displays. Whether it was the tactical situation display, I could pull up the lantern, I could pull up the weapons display, which was a aircraft overlay with showed me what weapon stations were where. I could pull up the OBC, I could pull up the bit page, anything. That was driven on MFD number 3. So you had the data entry panel, you had the MFD3, and then but where the F-14A and B had their DDD, that negative display, we actually had the DD, and the digital display was a digital processed image display that was your radar returns, but it was also where the RIO interfaced with the radar. And so that's where you spend all your time in the air-to-air environment operating the radar. But like I said, Top Gun's recommendations were generally to keep everything in the computer detent, except in times of electronic attack or in times that you needed to change if the system wasn't working. So the interface was all done in the DU, the MFD number 3, and the DD. And I also don't want to forget, a lot of this could be in later tape modes. We had mission data loaders that allowed us to download data from a TAMPS machine, and we could begin to preset functionality in the aircraft, whether it was radar, whatever it was, all sorts of things, mostly for our weapon system. But that MDL became more important with GPS almanac information, with
TAMP. Before we get too far, TAMPS is a mission planning machine, right?
Correct. The tactical airborne mission planning system. Yeah.
That's right.
TAMPS used a Unix code system. TAMPS didn't change since 1982. And so you'd be crushing it in an F-14D squadron in 2005 and 6.
Except I was air-to-air most of my career. So
Right.
Other than that.
Well, and in 2005 and 6, Crunch remembers, in 2003, the invasion of Iraq, that's when we introduced JDAM to the F-14D. And that's when TAMPS became essential because
all those JDAM missions had to be worked up on the TAMPS machine, loaded on the MDL.
Correct.
And you'd bring it out and you'd slug it in there. And sometimes guys would load up 2 of them, right?
Right.
Yeah, because you're like, this one's corrupted.
Right. And
we're in. Let's go.
Exactly. That was a new way of operating. And that was a great segue to the Super Hornet, where you now carry flashcards of the same style information. So the MDLs were a critical component. The TAMPS MDL interface drove the whole JDAM integration of the aircraft. We could talk about the Super Hornet, as well, unless you want to talk about something else.
No, let's go to combat in the F-14D.
Yeah.
Give us one of your most memorable combat missions. Crunch, is that about a good place to go, you think? Yeah.
I think so.
Oh boy. The one that I've alluded to already, I'll go back to, and that was the invasion of Baghdad in 2003. Certainly, that was a unique time with 3 F-14.
What squadron were you in?
I was actually a weapons school instructor augmenting VF2 at the time.
Wow. Who was the skipper?
At the time, that
Boog? Was it Boog?
Boog Deneni. Yeah.
The Great American.
And then I think Slim Whitson was just before him.
Okay.
So I am at the time I was a weapons school instructor, and the Tomcat community was directed to install the F-14B community had just finished its JDAM integration. The F-14D community was next in the hopper, and my job was to learn JDAM, GPS guided weapons, and then move with the China Lake Tomcat team out to the Lincoln, the Roosevelt, and then the Constellation, and install D03 Bravo on VF-31 213 and then VF2's F-14Ds, and then teach the aircrew how to employ JDAM. So
D03 Bravo is a tape designation.
It is. And the F-14D's tape designations married the years they were released. And so we moved up to ultimately D05 in 2005, which would allow us to drop.
Just letting the audience know what D03 is.
Right.
Okay, so you're out on the Lincoln.
I'm out on I moved from the Lincoln. I flew from Virginia Beach, joined the Roosevelt down in Rosie Roads. They were just finishing their Comp 2X, taught them how to integrate JDAM in. Then moved, and that was VFA 213. Flew up to Rota, caught a rotator out to the I think it was the
Probably
what was
Rota.
31 on the Lincoln. Caught 31 on the Lincoln, did the same integration software installation for them, and then moved to the Constellation and joined VF2 on the Connie to do the same thing. My old squadron, Boog, was great with having me stay out there as well. And so what I did was I was augmenting the squadron for the next 2 months during the invasion of Iraq. And so it was an awesome time to both integrate the squadron into my areas of expertise. We solved all the Link 16 challenges before the invasion. We solved all the JDAM integration, training, employment issues before the actual invasion, the shock and awe phase. And then came night 1 and 2 attacks. I was on the night 2 attack with Pace Passantrilli, and he and I are in a 4-plane division strike into downtown Baghdad, supported by an EA-6B Prowler. And for those that were part of those first couple nights of the invasion, you know that it was a rolling start. There was no go. It just kind of slowly kicked off. But there were also some terrible storms up to 35,000 feet. And so we, in our Tomcats, we were able to, as we were approaching these storms, we're like, we're going to climb and keep climbing. And our Hornet brothers decided that they could not climb over this weather with their JDAM loads. We had 3 GBU-31s. I believe they were carrying 2 GBU-31s each. And so they turned back to the ship, and we continued to climb up to 45,000
And
feet.
31 is a 1,000-pounder? Or?
That's a 2,000-pound GPS-guided bomb, JDAM. So we carried 3 of these things. 3 was an important number because we could carry 4, but you couldn't carry 4 back to the ship. We had,
Right.
And so 3 allowed us to return to the ship like our Hornet brothers had to that night. So we climb up to 45,000 feet. We exchange. Well, they give us their priority targets. We retarget all of our JDAM to take out the top 6 targets. Because remember, we were going to carry 6 plus 4. We were going to carry 10 weapons. Now we're down to 6. So we reprogrammed all of our JDAM. And wouldn't you know it, that's when my mission computer, one of them begins to fail on me. That always happens. I enter these coordinates, retarget, and all of a sudden the mission computer dies. And those F-14D folks out there, remember, all your displays go dark. And you have to recycle the circuit breakers, push them back in, and then everything starts up again. But you have to re-enter all the data again because the MDL has all the data from the original TAMPS load. No big deal. And so we're up at 45,000 feet. We're now
No big deal. He just added 20 minutes of work.
We're now screaming towards Baghdad. We probably have about 15 minutes until TOT. When I would enter whether the targets were all co-located, so we knew we were going to go. We had a waypoint in there. We coordinated the Prowler, which was offset about maybe 60, 70 miles to support our ingress. But we're now 2 Tomcats, 4 JOs, alone and unafraid, who are the only aircraft over this approaching Baghdad this night because the storms were so bad. The Prowler continued to support us. We're rolling up there. And about this time, we get the SA-2 indication on the nose. And so, okay, not surprised. Here it comes. The mission computer crashes again. And I'm now cycling the computer again, re-enter the coordinates in. And that's when it dawns on me, wait a second, these JDAM, I'm the Tomcat JDAM SME. I realize, wait a second, these things were only tested up to 35,000 feet. We're now at 45,000 feet. Maybe we should think about this. So I open up the manual. I literally have the manual release tables that China Lake had tested. They only go up to 35,000 feet. And that was important because these are battery-driven weapons. And the battery drives the GPS guidance system and the fins. So you need to ensure that you're not going to deplete it of battery energy. So I am literally cycling breakers on mission computer number 1. I am re-entering. I did this like a third time. I've got the manual release tables out as I'm extrapolating up to 45,000 feet to make sure that the battery time, the time of fall of the weapon, will not exceed 109 seconds. And I will never forget that number because that was the maximum time of the FMU 139 electrical fuse. Meanwhile, the SA-2 is looking at the surveillance system is looking at us too. And we'd heard VF-31 stories about dodging and weaving around SAMs that were coming up like telephone poles. So we're ready for this. And we're in an offense. I think we're in an offensive combat spread approaching the target. And I look at this and I'm like, these bombs are going to be flying for 107 seconds down to that target. We're in there. I'm like, you think about that. These things are going to be falling for nearly 2 minutes towards their target. I'm like, we're barely there, but we're going to do it. And so the system holds. The SA-2 never goes active. The clouds part about 20 miles south of Baghdad in Bio. It's the most surreal thing that you've ever seen. And I'm sure there are thousands of attack aviators out there who have stories like this where there are the lights of Baghdad beneath us. And we left the lights on. There's AAA coming up everywhere. And we have about 10 seconds to go. And, it was a quiet, eerie night. We're the only aircraft there. And I just give Pace 10 seconds to release. Master arm comes on. The bombs look good. Double check everything is functioning. And I tell you what, that F-14D made me proud that night. After we entered the pizza slice of the LAR right to the center, pickle, and it felt like 3 SUVs came off that Tomcat. And I've never, as soon as those 3 came off, I've never felt a more aggressive turn in my life. We both did an in-place turn, literally in-place turn, and we raced at about Mach 1.1.
Let's get the hell out of here.
Towards the Saudi border and then join an Air Force tanker. And that was although it was it sounds like a casual flight, that flight stuck out because of just 4 JOs in the middle of, a very
enemy country with who knows what was going to come up. The Tomcat was doing the best she could to support us. We troubleshot her. She worked. She did what she needed to do, delivering a brand new capability. As the community was in its swan song. It was just a beautiful night that just demonstrated. That is incredible. What an incredible story!
So
that was great.
That was a good one.
Wow. All right.
We're not going to ask you to even top it. I mean, that is like...
No, done. That's a great story. That's
block check.
Came back for an OK-3 night trap. Go get a slider.
And a slider, yeah.
Of course, Pace.
That's right. All right. So, cool. Good stuff. Hey, so tell us about the Tomcat in Annapolis.
Yeah, so my last tour in the Navy, I had the privilege of instructing at the Naval Academy, and I worked under Slapshot Carter. Bio, you might know him. Strike Group.
I think he went through Top Gun when I was an instructor.
Yeah, so he was a 120.
And he was good, man. He was good.
He was also a 124 instructor back in 84 and 85. So
yeah, that's when he did.
So these worlds all collided in 2018, 2017. I was in my final year at the Naval Academy running the Naval Aviation Training, Recruiting, Education effort. And we were doing a number of things to inspire these young men and women to follow in our footsteps. They all want to be Navy pilots, right? But very few of them even know what NFOs do. And so our challenge was to educate them and to help them decide between the two communities and to put the NFO community in the best light. So more importantly is we're competing with the Marine Corps and the SEAL community and the EOD community. We needed to do more to show how awesome naval aviation is, not just the strike fighter community, but naval aviation in general. We approached Slapshot with the idea of adding 2 more aircraft to the Naval Academy and building a naval aviation air park. And for the Academy graduates out there, you'll recall that the yard has always had a A4, it's an A4A and an F4E. That A4A is the same model that John McCain was shot down in back, in the 60s. The F4E is one of the later model Phantoms.
But
both of those
E is an Air Force model. You must mean a J. You must mean a J.
It must mean the J. There must be the J then. So the J, but it's a late model Phantom. Both aircraft though are shells. There's nothing inside them at all, and they're in bad states of repair. So Slapshot liked the idea of adding 2 aircraft, and we didn't know what aircraft. It's not like we can go out and just find these things. So what he agreed to was, let's go out and let's see what we can get, and we'll replace 2 with 2. He felt he could do that to not have to approach the Navy's Museum Memorial Committee, which was an essential thing if you're going to add things to the yard. So we went to the Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, and they were wonderful and pointed us immediately to a Prowler that was decommissioned and gutted and sitting at Andrews Air Force Base, just down the road in the Capitol Beltway. And then they said, hey, there's an F-14D at the Richmond International Airport. And would you like that? And I was like, are you kidding me? I'll be there tomorrow. and then they called me right back. And they said, whoops, we're sorry. The F-14D has already been spoken for by a museum in Nashville. And my heart sunk. And then she said, but we have an F-14A that's available at the Quonset State Airport, which is now the Quonset Air Museum up near Newport.
Rhode Island. Yeah.
So I had some friends who were at the War College run over there and take a look at it. They climbed over it and they said, fun, this F-14A is in pristine condition. In fact, there's a helmet still on the front seat. The whole AUG-9 system, the ejection seats, the entire system is all still there. They open panels up. They're like, the only thing that's been removed are the crypto units. And so we made verbal arrangements to take ownership of the jet. To make a long story short, I went down to Slapshot and I walked up and I put together the little brief of like, here's the Prowler, here's the Tomcat, here's what we got. He looks at the Buno of the Tomcat, which is 162591, and he does this. He's like, fun, give me a second. Rolls behind his desk, pulls out his log, and he's like going back and back, and he's like slowing down. He's like, I knew it. He's like, I have 100 hours in this jet when it was the air demo jet that he flew in VF-124 back in 1984. And he goes, how much is it going to cost to get here? So we turned to, and through a Herculean contracting and movement effort that took the next almost year and a half, we moved that aircraft from Quonset down to Annapolis, took the wings, the stabs off, trucked that thing down in the middle of the night, and then ultimately craned it in position and reassembled it. And then, to top it off, we repainted it as a 1984 VF-124 air demo team aircraft.
Very nice. Very nice.
And so that thing still sits proudly there, and will hopefully be sitting there for many more decades to inspire me.
I saw a lot of coverage on online when you guys did that effort, and more recently. And I didn't know you at the time, or that you had anything to do with it, but that brought a lot of pride to the Tomcat community and the Naval Academy community. So nice job I know there's hundreds of little things to chase down and fix to make that happen. So
yeah, that was it was an honor. But Bio, it was an honor to reconnect with the whole community, and the 4 aviators that are painted on that jet made it happen and helped out. That is Nasty Manazir and Slapshot on one side, painted names. On the other side is Stewie Stewart and Size Sizemore. And Size and Nasty would come out whenever they could to help out with whatever we needed done.
All great Americans. I know those guys.
It was remarkable to have them out there working and painting and slapping PVC pipes on the hydraulic actuators so that the horizontal the rudders won't move in the wind. I mean, Size up there cutting PVC. It was great. It really was a remarkable time.
So did that lead you to what you're doing now, or how did that connect you to your next adventure, your next phase?
It did. And I really owe it to that aircraft and everyone who was involved in this. I retired in 2017. This Tomcat moving effort took a year more. I was retired and running this for Slapshot, and I'm really honored he let me do this. And at the time, I was diving into entrepreneurship. I was involved in an effort to commercialize some Navy technology and biogas, and it wasn't working out. And I was at a year into the effort, and the Tomcat was sitting there needing to be painted. I took it, I created a small team to help finish restoring and repainting it. As I was struggling as a new entrepreneur, fresh retiree, and that Tomcat reminded me of really the values and the ethos of the Tomcat community, which we all know very well. It's not just get her done. It's based in teamwork, reflected in the team of two, the tenacity, the competitiveness, the drive, everything that made the Tomcat community what it was for 40 years was reflected in that effort right there. And it was working with Size who brought it out, who reminded me of an effort we had in 2005 on the Roosevelt. We added Rover to the Tomcat on its very last deployment to transmit video. He reminded me of all the great things we did. We made it happen. And so I took that opportunity to pivot my entire entrepreneurial focus to help other veterans and military spouses who are launching businesses and nonprofits. I realized as I stood on that aircraft, I'm like, man, I was built by this community, and I just wanted to pay it forward and everything it had done for me. And out of that failure as a first-year entrepreneur, I retooled the business to help other veterans and military spouses help them do what I had struggled to do better.
So what's your business called? Be sure to tell us.
Yeah, so Reformed is RE number 4 ORMED. Serves the veteran and military spouse community through virtual events and a family of back office business services that are all veteran delivered, that helps all of us launch and grow our businesses to make a small or big impact in the world.
That's awesome.
Man, you got your elevator speech down. That's very good.
That's awesome.
And what a great effort. No kidding, Crunch.
So what's the website for Reformed?
Yeah, sure. So it's www.reformed, and that's RE4ORMED.com.
We'll put that up.
Awesome. Very cool. Reformed.com. We'll see if we can throw that in the links below the episode. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, and I can't also hesitate to say we just launched a book. A number of us veterans. There's one other Tomcat aviator, Ponce Rivera, in there. So 13 veteran entrepreneurs who transitioned out of the military to become entrepreneurs and support each other. And the stories about how they have learned to lean on each other and support each other's growth as business people. And the story of that Tomcat is really centered. It's front and center in my chapter because it played such an instrumental role, as did Slapshot and Nasty and Size and Stewie in that transition of mine. And so if anyone wants to read the book, it's called Strength and Gratitude. It's available on Amazon. You can just Google www.strengthandgratitude.com. It'll take you to the Amazon link. You can check out that book and read about how F-14A Bureau number 162591 helped this little F-14D radar intercept officer succeed as an entrepreneur.
Awesome.
Fun. Awesome. Yeah, good. Nice next chapters, man. That's impressive.
All right, so now we can announce the winners of the giveaways from episode 10, which include copies of the book Top Gun Lessons from the Sky.
Yes, the winners of the books are Fabrizio Sartorelli and S. Manning. We will contact you by email to get your mailing address.
Hey, Bio, now is it true that we actually have a limited number of the embroidered F-14 Tomcat polo shirts for sale?
That's true, Crunch. As a trial, we had some dark blue shirts embroidered with the F-14 Tomcat logo. At this time, the only sizes available are large or extra large, and those are US sizes. Now, this is a bit tricky because we don't have a store set up. So if you are interested in a shirt, and remember, we only have sizes large and extra large, and the only color is dark blue, but please send an email to questions@f14tomcast.com and put polo shirt in the subject. We only had a limited number of shirts embroidered, so we can only sell to the first few people who reply, who express an interest. And we cannot guarantee a shirt for everyone who sends emails. We'll do the best we can. Also, it'll be one shirt per person.
Oh, great. Now, how much is that going to cost and how does one pay for it?
I'm glad you asked. So, let me remind you, don't send any money yet. If you are interested, send that email, and if we can provide you a shirt, we will reply. The cost is, in the United States, it'll be $45 per shirt. Sending it to Europe will be $70 per shirt, and to Australia, it's $110 per shirt. For other locations, send us your address and I'll have to check the postage rates because these prices include postage. Remember, we can't guarantee a shirt for every email, but if they're available, we'll reply to your email and make arrangements. Due to the limited number, the deadline for expressing an interest in a shirt is February 2nd, 2022. Good luck. Hey, this has been a great interview, and we're right about the right amount of time. Can you've covered a lot of stuff, and you certainly covered a lot more than I thought we were going to talk about tonight. Yeah. We covered the beeps and squeaks that Crunch was dying to get into, and we covered the combat mission, and we compared. Oh man, you did a great job tonight, buddy. So nice job representing the F-14D RIO community. Very well done.
Bio, can I tell one more story that means a lot to me about the F-14 community?
What do you think, Crunch? Okay.
Only if the audience asks for it. What do you say? Okay, go ahead. They said yes.
I just alluded to it, and it involves size more. As Crunch recalls, the last Tomcat deployment to Iraq, we were kind of alone and unafraid, and we were not really sure how the last Tomcat would be received on its last deployment. But we not only got the GBU-38 500-pound JDAM upgrade, we would get something called the Rover upgrade. And that to date, to me, remains one of the greatest legacies of that community because it demonstrated just how willing that community was to support the forces, the troops on the ground. And that the quick story is we check into Iraq 2005. We all come back after our first flights over country, and we've each been asked what our rover frequency is, and nobody knows what this thing is. Well, we do a little bit of research, check back with our program office in Pax River, which is now a team of like 2 people. And they were like, oh yeah, it's this new capability that's supporting ground forces with streaming video. Okay, well, what can we do about it? And quickly within like 48 hours, the program office, which was a team of 2, and us on the Roosevelt VF-31 and 213, came up with a way to install a rover-capable transmitter for full motion video off the Lantern pod down to troops on the ground for about $800 an aircraft. And those guys sent out a team to the ship. They were there within like 7 days with all the kits required, began drilling holes in the aircraft, installing the antennas, hot wiring the aircraft, jumping the lantern system. And we were flying that thing in support of ground troops in about a day. And what a victory that was. We Sizemore, I'll never forget this. I was with Twig LeBranch. Twig takes this idea and he's like, Twig walks us down to Size's office. Size sees the idea and he's like, we need to go talk to Admiral Winnefeld. Jaws Winnefeld catches the idea and he's like, let's make this happen. Well, I mean, we made it happen in it was like 14 or 21 days. And it remains to me one of the greatest legacies of the Tomcat community, just to show how flexible we were on its last deployment to support troops on the ground and make a difference.
Well, and that is impressive. I mean, I was a defense contractor sitting at a desk in the Pentagon, and I remember reading about this, and I'm going like, damn. Okay, Rover, I just looked it up. Remotely operated video enhanced receiver. So that's what it means, but it's what you already described, the capability. And that was a very nice parting shot, kind of.
And I know we're short on time and you guys are ready to go, but I want to tell that story because, it just demonstrated some of the greatest parts of our community with some of the greatest people that I've ever had the chance to work with. Lo and behold, many years later, there's Sizemore and I back on that 162591, painting that jet, trying to make that thing look pretty for Slapshot, and recounting that story back on the Roosevelt from 2005.
That's a good one.
That's awesome. That's good stuff. All right. Well, to everybody, I think that is an amazing interview. Fun. Thank you very much for your time. This was, I can tell you right now, this is going to be a fan favorite. That's my prediction. There's just some great stories, and you're a great storyteller, and I greatly appreciate your time. And I also thank you for everything that you do for our fellow veterans with your business, where you help them grow their businesses. So thank you for that.
Thanks, guys. It's been an honor.
Okay, this is a topic that we've thought about and decided to share. The F-14 Tomcast has production costs and other expenses for each episode. And frankly, we've been running at a deficit and have been since the beginning. We've been supported by the Fighter Pilot Podcast, but we'd like your assistance in helping us to balance the books.
And to support us, go to fighterpilotpodcast.com. Scroll down to where it says Help Keep Us in the Air and click on Make a Donation. When you donate, you'll have the opportunity to add a message. Please write in F-14 Tomcast.
You can use PayPal, a credit card, or a debit card to make a donation. For anyone who contributes $5 or more, we will list your name in the credits of a future episode. And for those who contribute $100 or more, I will send you an autographed copy of my book, Top Gun Days. Just be sure to leave your mailing address in your message. We hope you've found value in these episodes and will help us keep going.
And thank you for following our podcast. Wow, that was just a great interview. Not only his description of the F-14D systems, but at the end he was talking about moving the Tomcat to the Naval Academy and his work with ex-military entrepreneurs. It was very inspiring. But I do want to explain one term that Fun used near the end, and that's ROVER, R-O-V-E-R. And that stands for Remotely Operated Video Enhanced Receiver. And in simple terms, it allowed the F-14 crew to send images from their own sensors down to a ground-based laptop. It was an incredibly valuable resource for forward air controllers, and it was also used on some other platforms.
Thanks. I needed a refresher on Rover. One of the things that Fun said that made a big impression on me was how he dealt with a mission computer failure on a combat flight. Resetting the computer and re-entering the target coordinates on the way in, that's a varsity performance.
All right, that's it for today's episode. Please tell your friends about the F-14 Tomcast. We'd love to have more loyal listeners. And be sure to come back for our next episode, the F-14 in Desert Storm.
You've been listening to the F-14 Tomcast, part of the Air Combat Experience, brought to you by BVR Productions. Got a question for the show? Send an email to questions@f14tomcast.com or leave a message on our listener line at 877 Mach 101 extension 3. That's 877-622 4101 extension 3. For updates on this podcast and our other military aviation themed shows, visit bvrpro.com and follow the Air Combat Experience on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Thanks for listening.